You're listening to the Minor Detail Podcast, a place where all things community, encouragement, and lifestyle come together through meaningful conversation. I'm your host, Khaila Ariel, and I'm so grateful that you chose to join me on this journey of authenticity to serve as a link that amplifies human connection in our everyday lives. Navigating life on a daily basis can be difficult, but I am confident that together we'll be our own answer to life's minor little details that come our way. Sit back and enjoy today's episode, purposely curated just for you. Hey y'all, and welcome back to the Minor Detail Podcast. I'm your host, Khaila Ariel, and I am so grateful that you are tuning into today's episode. I am also beyond excited for y'all to listen to this conversation. It will definitely be a special one. Joining us today is someone near and dear to my heart, a sister, a soundboard, a woman becoming, and everything in between. My girl, Stacy Ike. Stacy is a renowned live TV host, one of the best journalists on the planet. Yes, I said it. And creator and host of podcast Human to Human in partnership with REVOLT TV. Stacy, it's an honor. Thank you for joining the show.
My girl, that was so sweet. That was so sweet.
Did you love it?
Yes. I'm glad I got to hear it naturally. That was amazing. Thank you.
I know. For everyone listening, I told her, I'm like, normally I read guests their intros before introducing them, or their bios rather, just to make sure, we're lockstep. They feel good about it. But today I told her that she doesn't get to listen because it's super personal. And I just wanted her to feel good about it. So I'm glad we're on the same page.
Yes. Agreed.
Well, listen, I am excited to dive in. But before we do, I will preface this by saying for everyone tuning in today, this conversation, we're titling it Girl Talk. I know that's different than what we normally discuss, or a different format. But what I realized last season, we tried this previously. Y'all loved it. It was one of the most widely listened to, tuned in episodes. So I'm just excited to bring Stacy in today. Like I said, she's well accomplished. She has it going on. And all the great things. But I think one important detail about the Minor Detail Podcast is that we often don't see what's happening behind the scenes. We often don't know, those, again, small little details that make us who we are. And so I think it's really important that we have today's conversation just around, the season that she's in, allow her to really tell us her story from her lens and what it is truly like to just be becoming. So I'm excited to have her on. I'm excited for y'all to listen. So with that said, Stacy, let's hop in.
Yeah. Let's do
Amazing. Okay. Well, before we really get started, I ask all my guests, how are you feeling today?
I'm good. I got to spend time with our mutual bestie, Precious, last night. So her and I hung out, got some girl time in, spent my morning, walking through my to-do list with Grace and saying okay, it's only a morning. You're not going to do everything on this list. So we're going to use this and map out. And so I feel good. I feel really good about that. And now we're in conversation.
I love that. And I think it's so interesting. My natural urge is to be like, what you and Precious do yesterday? But I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it. But I think I had the same type of morning where I'm like, okay, this is what I need to get done this weekend, both work and personal. But I think that grace factor is so important because we need time to rest and stop. And the weekend should allow us to do that. So I'm with you. I had that moment where I'm like, cool, this is everything I aspire to do. This is what I think is realistic. Let's go ahead and manage expectations up front.
Right.
And now we're here. So but I'm glad.
Right.
I too am glad that we get to talk. So this is exciting.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I think what is probably most important to start this conversation off is just to give listeners a bit more detail around our relationship, how we know each other. I think people who are familiar with me or have been following me for a few years, they know. But I think for anyone who's joining us, not later in the game, but who's new here, they are probably like, who is this girl? And why do they keep mentioning their relationships? Right? Exactly. But I think a part of what makes our relationship so special is just our history and where we have come from. So TDLR, for those of y'all who don't know, also shameless plug, episode 1, I kind of dive into this of season 1 of the Minor Detail Podcast. But when I was freshly out of college, I moved to Los Angeles, California, where I thought I would start my career as becoming famous. And in that process, I met Stacy and actually became her assistant. So it was a combination of like personal assistant slash brand, social partnership slash literally everything in between. Like I know we will chat through it, but like all encompassing. I don't
Yeah.
even know
Yeah.
if I've ever met another me, if I'm being honest, like
Yeah.
since then.
Yeah.
And on that journey, there was just a lot of newness. There were a lot of new experiences for me because at the time I also had like one other, it wasn't full-time job, but I had another job as a like front desk in a salon. But I also worked with Stacy very much full-time as her assistant. And we did a lot. Stacy
Yeah.
was and is a live TV host. She also worked a lot of red carpets. And literally like I don't know. I think the list goes on, but we just did a lot of like events, red carpets,
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
lot of, TV in studio appearances, as well as, her hosting those shows. And so it was great to just like dabble in what that world was like. I also wanted to work in entertainment journalism. So it was helpful for me to get that firsthand experience. But I also say like, you couldn't have paid for that experience, like by any means and there might be, but there's just like no straight and narrow path to
Mhm.
what that time brought for me. And I think it just was such a special time. But what I think is most important and what I learned, which we'll dive into as well, is like just the duality of like relationships and what that looks like.
Mhm.
But yes, I'd love for you to share from your perspective, like how this friendship came to life. Let's start there.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want you to dive in deeper on the duality part and like how you saw duality. For me, yeah, so before I met you so early into your LA career or LA journey, which was like really interesting already and really cool because I was like, wait, she like really just got here and will be a part of this. And where I was in my life was I was throwing a lot of new things to the wall. I had just gotten a television show. And then after that show got canceled, it was like, oh, we're going to keep going and I'm not going to stop. And our mutual friend was my brand manager at the time who had been other versions, like my stylist and my confidant and all these things. So her and I had already experienced so many transitions. And when she was like, you need, right before we had another assistant or I had another assistant. And before that assistant, I had like two other women that I had like worked with throughout the years that had just helped me out. Right. And so our relationship was even more significant because you were the first assistant I'd had for that long. Every other assistant was like maybe 3-4 months or so. And you and I worked together for a year and it was a very busy year. Like the amount of stuff we did in one year, it's also a very special time for me. It's a time that I grew a lot and I had to grow in front of people a lot. And that was really scary. That was really vulnerable. That was hard and really, really beautiful. Like I felt very lucky to be able to grow in front of people who had space to hold me. Like I was trying to become a new leader and trying to become like, I had been this other person who had been doing this by myself for so long. And then all these people are here to be like, we're supporting you. I'm like, what that mean? What that look like? How does this work? Like, what do figuring out everything to like, how can I compensate you, whether it's time or it's money or it's resources or it's expert experience? Like, how can I do those things? How can I show up for you? How do you help me show up for myself? What does my level of trust look like with these people? And then once it started, like our trust started getting deeper, assistant is such a big role in somebody's life. Like I don't play with assistants. Like I'm just very, very serious about assistants. I've had enough experience to be like, nah, assistants like A1 on the team. Like they're not assistant. I don't, to me, it depends on how you see the word assistant. Like, I don't think it's somebody's like, oh, that's an assistant. They wave it off, but that's like such a big role to me. That I really appreciated. Like from the first day we worked together, I still think about how your second day working with me, I had to do an interview and somebody was interviewing me and I was like trying to walk you through what I wanted you to take videos of. And you're like, I'm good. I got it. And you just snatched my phone. And I remember looking at you like, girl. And I said, you know what? I think I might like her because that type of like, just trust me. Like you just really asked me to do it so quickly. I really honor that. I like when people are confident enough to be like, I got this. and like, whether they have it or not is the journey we're going to go on. But them asking and being ready to ask, to me, is like a sense of ownership and autonomy in their role. They take it seriously. So I thought that was so dope. So, when you left the team and, we had this meeting, I remember, I think it was like a dinner or a lunch, and you're like, okay, so, I'm exiting the team, I'm leaving, and I'm moving back to Dallas. And I was shook and unhappy. Like, all of those things were true. I was, and I did see it coming just based on where the team was at that time. I think we had a couple of like, cause even with the jobs I was getting, a lot of them were gigs. I hadn't, my show had finished, and it was like, oh my God, like, okay, if the money's not coming in, how do you keep everyone going? And I was very aware of the multiple ways you want to make sure your people are good and still making sure I was good. So it was just like a lot to learn so quickly. So anyway, when we had that talk, I was super unhappy, super sad. Very much understood why, but it was like, of course, the feeling, right? And so what I love, and how to like go even deeper into how the friendship started, is I think the first truth for me is like, you didn't leave and I rose to the challenge. Those are two things that happened at one time, because I wanted to sulk, and you wouldn't, like, you were like, okay, you could sulk, but like, I'm probably going to pop up in like a couple weeks and try to be over it. And I'm like, I'm not trying to be over it. Like, I was not sure. I just was not sure because I was so sad. I was like, wow, I remember my feeling of abandonment. I remember all of those things and being like, I don't really feel like working through this. I do think our relationship, because I will find out years later that I'm going to constantly deal with that. People are going to come and go all the time. And I think if it wasn't for how you and I like maneuvered through that, I wouldn't have had the skill to constantly maneuver through that. So I think the beginning of that was like, you asked me how I was feeling, and I was very clear with you of like, I'm annoyed. And so I need you to back up. And you're like, okay, I'm gonna back up, be right back. And then you came back, and it was like, I like this person. And so let me see what it's like to stay vulnerable with her, but in a friendship and not a working relationship. And, now it's 5 years later, here we are.
Crazy that it's 5 years later.
Or like, 4. Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure it's like 5, if I'm being honest.
It's 5 from when we met. Yes.
Yeah.
But
from 4
moment,
since yes. Because I was only in LA for a year. And I think what I remember, and it's so funny too, like having this conversation, because it's like, I would have never known. Like, I knew you felt abandoned because we probably had that conversation, but I would have never known, like, moving on from that role was the decision that I had to make. But there was like, my intention was never to stop being in your life. Like, I was just like, okay, I can't work for you anymore, but like, we're going to figure this out somewhere else. So that in my mind, I'm like, cool. So I would have never known that you like were thinking twice about that. You know what I mean? It just because like it came so naturally. But I think just with my time in LA and it being such a fruitful year, but also just a hard year at the same time for me, like I'm trying to figure it out. I'm broke. I am broke. You know what I mean? And I think we always had an understanding, because you mentioned taking care of your team and compensation. Like it was a team effort, truly. Like Precious knew what she was getting into. I knew what I was getting into. You knew what you already had established and what you needed. But like, there was only so much that you could ask of us genuinely, because again, compensation is like a huge thing. Like that's a big conversation. Yeah. And you were only capable of doing so much. But I think it was like, we were just all in it. You know what I mean? Like Precious and I wanted to give our time to you and like watch you work and build and like serve you in that way. But we also knew that like we were getting something out of it too. Cause I think back and I'm like, would I ever be able to like be Stacy in that position? Like have legit, like people working full time around the clock, but compensation be so not like, I don't want to say not typical, but just not in alignment with what you would probably see, with a normal assistant relationship or whatever. And that's tough, but it was in alignment. Like it was special. And it's something that I always tell people, like, I definitely don't regret. Would I do it again? Maybe not, but again, the experience was just so insane. And Precious didn't even freaking live in LA. Like that was something else that I just thought of. Like we were making it work.
Really traveling once a month. And she was, everyone had, basically everybody, it's like nobody had a hard key to my house, but low key it was like, where's the address? This is the office. Like we're at her house. We meal prepping together. Like it was the type of alignment and relationship that I think, again, everybody, I believe, I hope learned something and got something out of it. And I think that like, as we're in our friendship further, I can tell, and I believe that. And I think that also gave me a lot of safety, because I felt it was such a hard, like I said, I was having to learn and fail and fall and grow in front of you guys. And that was like a lot. I'm like, there's a lot of people watching me, and like, what? I don't
But
have
I
any
will,
training in this.
what I will tell you though is like, I still think about you in those moments till this day. Like, just you carried yourself so gracefully, even in like moments that weren't graceful, if that makes sense. Like, you had your moments where I'd be like, oh, she is tripping. But I get it. I get it. But you handled it so like, and you learned, like you learned and you kept growing and you kept showing up. And because of that, it caused Precious and I to learn and to keep growing and keep showing up. Like, y'all, we would be at like Essence Fest one weekend, and then at like African American Black Film Festival in Miami like 2 weeks later. Like, this is not, this was, we were not playing small. We were invited into these random rooms and would just be like, okay, like, hey, you know what I mean?
Let's do it. Let's show up. And then when we come in, we'd be such a package deal. Like, I just remember feeling like really packaged up and ready to fly. And I think never playing small has been something I've noticed about my personal life. And it's kind of like awesome and hard, because when you start playing at a certain level, you only go up from that level. And I'm like, whoa, I need some bass. So like, that was something that I think I recognized in that moment of like, you know, I had a wonderful opportunity on the on Oprah Network by the time y'all got in. So we had already started at like a certain level, and it was like, who wants to match me here? And everybody was ready to match. So we just kept going. And that's why the growth was so much in such a short period of time.
Absolutely. So let's talk about duality of it all, because you said that you wanted to expand, and I think, or elaborate. And I think that that is so important, because I just remember having to navigate like a growing, budding friendship and the expectations of like a boss at the end of the day. And you never referred to yourself as like my boss. I think you were very intentional about, like, you always said, like, I just want you to walk away with like something you can put on your resume. You know what I mean? Like something tangible, like hard skills that you can communicate if you were to ever want to pivot into like some other role. And I think that that was really important, because I now work in corporate. Like, I have worked in corporate for the past probably like 3 to 4 years now, in different capacities. Like, that's another conversation. But for the longest, I did, like, once I learned how to take those skills that I grew with you, once I learned how to take those into like, you know, tangible skills that I could talk about in interviews and like, and really bring to the table, I think that's when I realized like, oh yeah, like we were actually doing things. And I will say, for the record, that was at the height of influencing, which I think is also important to note, because you were doing something so special, especially as like a Black, I won't even say a Black creator, but just like a Black figure in that space that a lot of people had never seen before. Like, it was an act, like a literal production to have 2 people with you everywhere you go. Like, that is a production within itself. And we were making it happen. And I think that's why it's so important to think about, is because now 5 years later, it's the norm. But back then it was not the norm. Like, people would be like, if you were to go like not show up on Instagram for a week or two, people be like, oh, you're not doing nothing. You remember that?
Yeah, girl. And we were always trying to, I don't want to say we were trying to keep up, because we did have it in us. We really did. But you're right. We just were always constantly putting things out that people noticed when we weren't around. People noticed when it was like, oh, you don't have your crew. And I'll be like, oh my God, it was working. It was really working. That was actually the gag. I was like, oh, this is working, and we are doing things. And thank you for pointing that out, of like all the newness, because I think something me and Precious reflect on that a lot. We say, when I have moments of doubt of like what I'm doing isn't working, she's like, well, you've done a lot already. Like, you just did things early. There were times you were earlier than your time. We were starting Fight for Your Fairy Tale. Like, what? We had a whole brand collection. Like, it was clothing. What was going on? That was a lot. And like, to this day, I just talked to the Fight for Your Fairy Tale team. And I remember, actually, I talked to them recently, but I did talk to them in 2021. And I told them, I was like, you know, I'm kind of ready to put Fight for Your Fairy Tale down for a minute. And they're like, no, you were ahead of your time. And I was like, they thought that? Like, that was such a cool reflection. They're like, no, that messaging was ahead of its time. So like, don't just get rid of it. And so those kind of things keep me like remembering and grateful for like everything you experienced and really believing that everything does come back around and does work out for you. But you're right. There was so much newness. And my God, it didn't fit to us. Like I felt like we were like ridiculously good at this. I was shocked. I'm like, what is going on?
I can give myself that pat on the back. We were great at it. Okay. Like, we were. And it would be times where like I will never forget transparent moment. So disclaimer, the media brunch where you had a moment, and I can't remember like what it stemmed from, honestly, but it was just like a lot. We were on this rooftop. It was hot as heck. There were so many people. It was my first time doing an event with y'all. And it was like the first learning experience for me, and like what it truly means to have someone have expectations of like what your role is, and you showing up to do that. You know what I mean? I think that was that was such a pivotal point in our relationship, in duality in general, because it's like, all right, I expected you to be here and like you were doing your makeup and like getting ready, and that's fine. But the expectation was like for you to support me. And in that, and you didn't break down, because I don't believe you broke down because I wasn't supporting you. I think there were many factors that played into it. But in that moment, I was like, okay, got it. You know what I mean? Because and now when I look at people and I work with people, I'm like, yeah, people don't be knowing like what showing up and, number one, doing your job, if we're just being quite honest, but just being supportive and like picking up on those cues is and looks like. And I think after that, like we were solid. Like we moved so fluidly, all three of us.
Yeah, that's that was you're right. Cause even asking for those expectations was something I wanted, but it's a skill to learn to ask that without making someone feel like this is not about like you as a character or you as a person. This is really just about the job and how I need you to use that character and those skills you have to actually support what we're building, and like somehow still have the skill to balance what you got to get done. Cause yes, your makeup does have to get done. Like that is the truth. And so, I'm leaving it to you to figure it out.
No, literally. And I think what was also special too about that is like, I don't know. I just remember feeling like, oh, that's what because I was like, where was I going with that? I also remember like we talked, like we had such an honest conversation about it after that, like us three, because that was still early in the beginning of like our relationship. And I think I was even able to communicate to you guys like, hey, God, that these were your expectations. These were the things that were not communicated. So like, I'm not just going to know that you're wanting these things. Like we have to talk through them. And I think that's also when we started to debrief after every freaking event. Take note, like y'all, we would go, Stacy would walk carpets, go to an event, she would host, it would be amazing. We'd go back into the hotel room and spend an hour and a half, like, what did not work? What worked? Who did we hate today? Did you see her outfit? Like it would be so hilarious, because it's just like, we need these moments, these like learnings, because the next time we come around, we're going to apply these things and we're going to be that much better. And I think that also was like super helpful in the relationship too.
Girl, we were as tight as what was not in the purse that we needed. Oh, your dress went up and we didn't have safety pins. We're double buying safety pins next time. What tape do we need? Because that like shirt might come off. What type of cue cards do we need to make sure that like your cards don't show? I mean, that, man, I'm telling you, that was the beginning of me being like, oh, I'm a leader. And like, I have real people teaching me how to lead, because I think I've been led as well as leading. Right. And like, when you have people who can reflect back to you that like, you guys point, but Stacey, you didn't do this. And you're like, you're right, I didn't do that. It was just, I'm in love with those type of relationships where it's like, now we both have to be a mirror and we have to trust each other's feedback and we honor each other in that. And so there's like room to be like, hey, what went right? What went wrong? What could have gone better?
Absolutely. And I think the last piece that I will share on duality and just like this being such an all-encompassing experience is that like one moment I would be like laying your edges, or we wouldn't have like hair and makeup. Like I think I helped with your makeup one time and I was like, all right, this is where I draw the line, Stace. I am not an MUA, but we would be like, I would be laying your edges, like blotting your makeup before you went on. And then the next like 30 minutes we'll be talking about relationships, and then the next 15 minutes after that we'll be like bumping shoulders with CEOs, and it's just like, who are we? What are we doing?
I enjoyed that. I enjoyed it. And I think like again, that skill of knowing how to bounce between so many different spaces and doing it with grace and not being like afraid of the different spaces and just taking the right people with you. Like I felt we were so right to move through that. Like we had this amazing, we didn't even have like a code, but we had a code. It was like, hey girl, we have to talk to those 3 people before we leave this room. Hey, we need to check in with that person. Didn't you say you want to check that person? Oh, they're actually here. Like, okay. And in the background, okay, also your edges. I mean, your earrings falling off. Like it was just like you had to be, yeah, just to be in that environment, we had to be who we were. Like my cousin always makes jokes. Actually, she just made a joke about this recently because I was telling her about how you, me, and Precious like had a meeting once and we were all just kind of talking through free time. And she was like, yeah, you attracted people like you because that ain't what people doing on a Monday. They're not talking about like, they're not doing that. I was like, you're correct. So Free Time is a book that these 2 beautiful women introduced me to. And so we were all like diving into just how to make our business practices easier and better and more cohesive. And like, I was talking about how just going to talk to you guys about that. And she was like, you have friends just like you. I was like, yay, I do. So yeah, that's how that was too.
It's so amazing and beautiful. Also, I was going to text you and Precious to let y'all know we should do free time together this week coming up, but another conversation for another day. But no, I love all of this. I think what this all comes down to is, number one, I've watched you operate in such different capacities for such a long time, like a businesswoman, a leader, a woman evolving and becoming. And man, I just know that there's so many capacities that you're constantly bouncing into, balancing at the same time. And I do want to know or hear from you at least. I'm sure this is something you reflect on because you're such a huge reflector. But what do you think are some of like the bigger differentiators, I guess, between who you were back then, 2017, 2018, and who Stacy is now, 2023?
So my relationship with myself is deeper, more expansive. It has more layers to it. And the relationship with yourself is the beginning of every other relationship you have. And so at that time, you know, I was 26, I think 25 or 26, 26.
27. You're 27.
27 when you came in. Okay. Cause I'm like, okay, I got the show at 26. So by the time I met you, I was 27. Or you were there for my 27th birthday. So I just think about what happened at 28, 29 and how like my world started shattering when it came to like my spiritual growth and my awareness and my perfectionism and like all these things that started coming to the head of like, these things are not serving me anymore. How do I want to approach them now? How do I want to dismantle my perfectionism and make myself a more like open, nuanced person who loves living in the gray area? I didn't have that skill or that knowing at that time. And so I think that's expanded me in a way that has given me just more grace for myself and for others. I think my priorities are different. I think I leaned way more into my vulnerability now. I use it as a armor and as a like strength and not a weakness. That was what I mean by learning in front of people was really great, but like, it's hard. It's so uncomfortable sometimes because you just don't know if people are judging you. There's shame around that. Sometimes you don't know if people are like, I mean, that's something I still deal with here and there, but it's just like being like a person who wears your heart on their sleeve is something that's real to me now and still scary, but like I own it more. And I'm like, this is really who you are. Like, there's a reason you do the work you do because you really do care about human connection in this way. You really are like obsessed with trying to figure out how to be in relationship with yourself more like healthy and more accommodating and more kind so that translates to how you treat other people and how, you know, what relationships you seek and how you can serve other people. So I think those are like huge differentiators. I also think that, yeah, I think in the navigating, like self-regulating my emotions, I'm way better at it now. I think something that you and I always, like, I love that you and I kind of caught on to this at the same time. Like one time we had this conversation about just getting through our emotions faster. Like everyone I believe is an emotional being, but some people handle their emotions differently. So I know I feel things and trying to feel things on a business level, on a personal level, like there's just too many levels. And it's like, all right, I got to cut one of these levels in half because I got to get to the thing. And it's not to say I want to like throw that emotion away, but it's like, I don't want to sit in my sadness as long as I used to, because I don't need it as much. I don't need to be there. And I don't want to sit in my like disappointment as long I can immediately say, hey, everything's working out for you. I can have the skill of doing that now and recognize like, you don't have to be here that long. Now you can stay sometimes, but just knowing how to self-regulate better. I think that's very much affected in all those realms that you mentioned, affected me better and just giving me more space to like be and grow. And I do pride myself. Like I try to hold myself to growth faster. Like I'm not in a like damaging way, but I am aware of like, I'm always reading a book. I'm always trying to like, I'm always reflecting. I'm always asking like, am I tripping? Like I'm doing that regularly because I want to be my best self in this life. Like, I don't want to wait till I'm 90. I don't want to like come back the second time. Like I want to do this this time. So all of that I think has just made me a better woman in all those capacities you mentioned, and have definitely given me, have been a lot of my growth since we met, since 2017.
That's amazing. And I think what's also really interesting about all of that is that there's just like a lot of self-work that happens. And there is a lot of like unlearning that happens. There's a lot of open-mindedness that I've watched you navigate through. And I just think it's just so important because like you said, when you know yourself on a deeper level, you're able to just operate in such a different space. Like just I'm in this space of the mindset that becoming the best version of myself is my literal top priority at this point, right? Like when you let go of the surface level things that you thought mattered that are really just big distractions, the things that like you hang on for days and days, sometimes months, like you said, like emotions and not getting through them quick enough, or like constantly ruminating things on your brain. When you let go of like those minor things, you tap into a different version of yourself that you are now operating in, and you're realizing like, man, like that really just does not bother me like it used to. Like this is so small, but this morning I was like going up to my balcony to read and just like be in prayer for a little while. And like I spilled I was just struggling. I had too much in my hands, but I spilled my water and like everything spilled out. It was on the floor. And I was like, you know what? This is not stopping me today. Like, this is not like, like it's so small. It's just water. It's just spilling something. But like, when like the smallest things can throw you off your game. Like my plan was to be in prayer, be in my word, like just spend some time talking to God and just like being in nature, being connected. This is not about to stop me from doing that ahead of like my podcast conversation with Stacy. You know what I mean? So it's like the smallest things. And it just, I don't know. In that moment, I felt such grace. Like I gave myself such grace for being able to bounce back and be like, it's all right. Like we still rocking and rolling,
Right. Girl, that you say that, like, yes, it's small if you like minute it, but I understand how like that little thing can just, because it's just, you're trying to balance all the time. We're trying to find our harmony. We're trying to like, there are time control. Like we did have a time set. There are things to do. So it's like when little things happen, it could just make you feel some type of way. And it's like, actually, it's not that, but having the grace to do that takes time, I think.
It really does. And I think if I could just share my thoughts on how you've grown.
Oh,
if you welcome me in that space, I think that, watching you the past couple of years has been very inspiring because I feel like you've really taken the hypothetical handcuffs off of yourself to be in a space. I met you, like we said, at 26, going into your 27th birthday, which that party was so fun, by the way. I met you then to now, being at the stage that you're in. I'm thinking just about how like you were like selected, handpicked by Oprah to be on her network, to be on a show. And then you were hand selected by Fox to be on their network, to be on a show. And that was just insane because we were like in Pop Sugar studio eating their charcuterie. Like you had a stylist. Exactly. You had a stylist. It was just very Hollywood to now like being in such a different space and running your own podcast and producing your own podcast and just like being open to what life is bringing you. I think that's so big. Like we don't give ourselves enough credit for how we evolve into and are becoming into like what our purpose, our calling is versus what we think it is. Not saying that like you thought all you could do was host on television or you thought all you could do was red carpets, but I'm sure that took a lot of like surrendering to be like, you know what, Stacy, allow yourself to do this new thing, allow yourself to be stripped of the titles, to be stripped of other people's points of view, to be stripped of, you know, what you thought you were supposed to be doing, and step into this new thing. You know, you're going to be the sole proprietor, the owner. You're going to have ownership over this new thing, and this is what you're being called to do. Like, kudos is what I'll say. You know, like, I just get chills thinking about it, because I'm like, bruh, that is not easy. People stay stuck for years, for their lives, because they don't want to pivot. Not that they don't know how to, but they're so uncomfortable with the uncomfortable that what they're being called to just feels out of reach. Like, you going after that is like, that's major. So yeah. Congrats.
Girl, thank you. That really means a lot. Like, that really means a lot, because I definitely think that, yes, it took a lot of surrender. I think it took a lot of like being willing to, what's the word? Like, just not be so attached to what I think other people think about me, or what I think I'm meant to do. And that is a constant learning. Like, when I started this podcast, it was kind of birthed out of like my own need for healing, my real big need for healing. And I had just gotten rejected by a huge company, and I had auditioned with them 5 times, and I was so sure it was for me. And I was like, this is my next big job. And because in the industry, like, that's another thing about being in LA and in Hollywood, I think it builds a certain fear mongering experience in your career, because, you know, you're only as good as the last thing you did or the next thing you're about to do. And that is just so opposite to how I live as a human being. So that's what's weird. That was so weird about it, and such a struggle, because you're like, my show's gone. Okay, I got to get another one. It's like, damn, I ain't even bask in the last show I did. Like, that was really, really dope. And I spent a lot of time not basking, and because there was no time to. You can't just bask, because they're not going to give you another job because you had that other one a couple months ago. Like, they might not care. And that was a crazy, like, way to live for a while. So being able to really honor what I'm doing now, take it as seriously, love it, feel like it's just as big, if not bigger, than anything I've ever done, because it's like so aligned with what I care about, that I really appreciate that reflection. I definitely think it was a hard moment, but that's what's grateful. Like, I'm grateful about having a community that I can like touch base with, tell them, and they'll be like, this pivot is amazing. And because I remember when I told you, I was like, okay, I'm thinking of like moving, and I think I'm doing this. And y'all were like, whoo, we were so excited. I'm like, y'all suck. And I'm saying y'all as in my friends Khaila and Precious, particularly, because I definitely called them, and I called a few friends, and one of my other friends, Stephanie, she was like, oh my God, like, I've been waiting for you to say you wanted to move to Houston. I was like, really? What are y'all talking about?
We wanted her in Texas so badly, because when I was like, I'm going back to Texas, Precious was also like, man, you inspire me. Like, I'm going back to Houston too. Like, you know what I mean? And so when you didn't move until like, what, 3 years later? Like, yeah, it was a while. But once you did, I think me and Precious probably had like a celebration separately without you. And we're like, we did it. We got her to come back to Texas. Like, we're all in Texas.
Oh my God. I was like, wow. And there was such a grounding coming back to like, oh man, just to finding a different home here and trying to celebrate myself at the same level in my home. Like, that is major. And so I'm just, that's my new basking. So I really do appreciate that reflection. That's dope.
For sure. You're my girl. I got you. I thought you were going to cry. I was going to be a nice add to the show, but it's cool. We'll try to get there.
I thought about it, and I was like, do not cry on this girl's podcast. Oh my God. And I will if I need to, but my God, I need to like hold it, because you might say something else later. Who knows?
Yes. No, don't worry. But no. So what I want to pivot to is talking a little bit more just about building and being a leader. As promised, I let the folks know that we're going to get into the nitty gritty of the behind the scenes, because now we're in a new season, and things they're moving, right? Yeah. But not without work. And I think this is a topic, I know this is a topic that we often discuss in our conversations offline all the time, that I think is so relevant for women in our position, because the fact is, it's hard out here. It's hard work happening out here. How are you navigating this season of your life? Like, what is the experience like that people are not seeing happening behind the scenes?
So navigating the hardness, one thing that like I am just having to own right now is like my unhappiness in what I'm doing. I love the macro, but the micro details are really difficult. Like, yeah, it's just like, oh, okay. So you mean I got to show up today? Oh, and again today, and again today. Like, it's a lot of showing up that requires a version of me that like sometimes I just don't want to give. And that when I sit in the, oh, this is really difficult, sometimes it leads to me being unhappy. And I was really kind of sitting with that this week, because this was a really hard, like creatively fatiguing week, but so much good stuff was happening. I had these bomb interviews and like, got to reflect on like amazing stuff. And then I got all these reports due, and we're on this, like, we have, episodes coming out, and like all this great stuff is happening. But on the micro level, what it takes to make sure it happens is a lot of like, at the same time, somebody quit on my team this week. Right. And like experiencing and feeling that, and knowing I don't have a lot of time to feel my way through that. This is a emotionally regulating moment of like, I am going to express my feelings. And funny enough, you happen to call me the same morning that it happened, an hour after this person quit. So your mirror in that moment absolutely helped me get through. Like, I had an interview an hour after, you know what I mean? And I was like, okay, this is kind of a lot. And that's where like that leadership, that womanhood, that you're a human being and I don't want to do this, all collide. I'm a leader. It's my podcast. I got to do the episode. Like, they're booked for noon, right? That has to happen. But then you're also experiencing the emotions of somebody just left your team, and you don't, whoa, okay, pause. And then, okay, I would like to just throw the day away. Cannot, you know what I mean? And then you're like, when do I process? And then like, how do I allow myself to feel like, give myself grace and love in this moment, and recognize the hardness of what just happened. Right. And so I got to express some of that to you, and you were so gracious in your response of like, I don't want you to internalize this. That was so helpful for me to get through the rest of the day. I expressed it to another friend, and, she gave me even an added feedback, and I'm like, okay, like, I think I'm going to walk past this. I'm going to give this a 3-day process. And I don't think it's going to need to be 2 weeks. It doesn't need to be that. And that's a lot behind the scenes. Like, that's a lot of the little things that are happening, when timelines, and like, one thing about me, I'm still recognizing, because I'm always trying to decipher between perfectionism and doing good work. I really care about doing good work. And at the same time, like, I'm a recovering perfectionist. So sometimes that like collides, and you don't want it to collide, because that perfectionism does not allow you to, it doesn't allow us to, our humanness to like really shine through and be real. It allows a lie to like continue to perpetuate, versus just the wholeness of doing good work does allow humanness to be a part of it. Right. And so having to navigate through all of those things, having to navigate how to express your expectations, your concerns, while still giving people the moments to be vulnerable, to tell you shit that they don't like about your shit. That is hard. You be like, wow, okay. I'm a feedback galore person, like probably to a gluttony level, because I feel like I begin letting like my sister, she's always like, you're letting too many people give you feedback, because it's starting to make you feel like you're doing something, like that's a lot. But I am big on that, because I want to be my best. And I just mean be my best for myself and for others. So those are like some of the multiple things. Then I think boundaries are a big thing too. As a leader, like, I don't really get to have as many boundaries as everybody else, because it's my thing. And that's a hard place to be sometimes. Sometimes I like to go to bed at 9. And if somebody needs something from me at 10, if I'm already asleep, cool. But if I'm not, they might get that thing at 10. And I don't really want to give it to them, but like, it's my team. So even though they're past the time, now I'm past the time. And like, that's another thing you got to navigate. That's what I mean by the constant showing up. And so and then navigating like I love eating healthy, and I want to eat, like, I want to read, and I want to like spend time with my friends, and I want to see my family, and like navigating all of those things. My mom today was like, hey, can you pick up your aunt from the airport? I said, I cannot. And she's like, I said, I cannot. She goes, you don't have an hour? I said, I do not. I sure do not. Managing the boundaries of that, while like, I'd love to see my aunt, but like, I have a day plan, right? So now I got to fit y'all in on Sunday, or it might be a next weekend. I'm just going to hold you in my heart and my prayers until next week, because sometimes that's also part of it too. It's a mess. Like, it's just like, oh, okay, this is the adulting. And I don't believe in balance. I believe in harmony. I think balance is a joke now that I've like, I really did my best to like love it and subscribe, but I'm like, nope, you don't exist. So now that I'm in the harmony space, I just want a harmonious experience and a harmonious life, and to continue to weave everything in, and like recognizing this is you're okay. this is like honest, this is happening. This is not like, you're not doing anything wrong. It's just layered.
For sure. And I love that you just said that, because I think that that's so special. The difference between balance and harmony. I feel like I probably unsubscribed from the mindset of balance within the last like 2 years or so, because I too was just feeling like we're trying to balance all of these things at once. And that's not what it's about. Like, it's about fulfilling, or not even fulfilling, but it's about filling your time with things that fulfill you, and finding a harmonious way to do so, like you said. Or I like to think that my life is like fluid, like everything just flows together. And if something is off, like how can I check my heart posture? How can I check the things that I am consuming, or like just participating in? Like, there's going to be something that sticks out. But again, it's not like, all right, I need to have the perfect balance of like meal preps and then working out, and then I need to read an hour every day. Like, no, there's a difference between like a routine that just like works for you to operate at your best self, versus like trying to schedule and coordinate balance into your day to day. That's unrealistic.
Yeah. It just doesn't leave room for like life, and life will come and be like, hey, I know you wanted this Tuesday, but we're going to give you this instead. And it's like knowing how to incorporate that part of life into your life is a constant work in progress too.
For sure. And I love how you talk about too, like the behind the scenes and how they're hard, because I think what I've been also communicating just in general, I'm like, it's hard. I'm not operating in my own strength. Like, I do believe I'm operating in God's strength in this season, because there's no way that I could do this on my own. Like, it's not possible. Right. And I think that, the hardness doesn't feel as hard when you have that mindset, but there's definitely just like constant tug and pull. Love that you said this is a hard week for you creatively, because same. Same.
I don't know if it was that Q1 finish or what.
maybe like the aftermath, but I too was like, man, I never take this long to edit podcasts. Like, usually 2 sittings and done. This week it took me 3, and I'm like, okay, we're hitting the wall.
Yeah. Oh man, I had a very similar situation with some marketing stuff. I was like, wow, I'm going to have to move through the weekend on this one. Like, I can't get it to you by Friday. I thought I can't believe it, but okay. Like, I'm going to need to believe it, because that's just where you're at. Like, even trying to talk my way through that of like, you cannot force yourself to do something, like, because again, the deciphering of even the word lazy, like, is that even fair to even try to use? Like, does it even make sense? But like, let's just use it for the lack of absolute better word. If I'm navigating through, oh, is this you being lazy, Stacy, or is this a moment that you're generally spent and you don't have it? Because if you show up right now, it will be absolutely at 40%. And is the 40% really what you want to give at this moment? Probably not. So like, we're going to have to find that extra 60, and we're going to have to flow to get it. We're going to flow past this. And like, we're just going to have to be honest with that. So moments like that are, they're special, because I'm like, oh, okay, you can give yourself these. But it's that constant monitoring of showing up and knowing when to give yourself space and grace. So it's,
for sure. But I think that's special though, because like, even hearing you say that, it struck a chord. Is like being able to decide when it's time to give grace, and when it's just time to lay it down. Like, that's powerful, because I think a lot of people will often, especially in our position, will guilt trip themselves into working themselves into the ground. And it's like, it's just not worth it today. Like, if we need to do it on a Saturday, that's cool. Like, you're not going to die. Like, no one's going to hate you.
Yeah. And then we're so like, oh, I love us so much. I love human beings so much, because we are so like, we are really our hardest critics. And the self-love journey, like, is really not a game. Like, we might be talking about it on Instagram or on social or in the world right now on a very minimal level. But like, the more I'm getting into the weaves of self-love, the more I'm like, oh, the practice of self-love shows up every single day. So every single day we have to practice. So when there's a moment of fatigue, or there's a moment of like not good enough, or there's a moment of, I don't think I can do this right now, that's an opportunity to practice. Like, take the opportunity. And it doesn't mean like, learn how to hold yourself, learn how to talk to yourself, learn how to like really be compassionate with yourself. This is stuff that I'm like, wait, this is hard, because I have been, grappling with my, like, if perfectionism was the thing I had the longest practice in, Grace is not the thing I had the longest practice in. So I am actively making it a practice of like, hey, this is a moment of grace. This is a moment of self-love. This is a moment of you can do this and you're going to push through. Like learning to juggle and balance between those three and giving every single version of that space. Like whatever the truth is, let it be the truth.
It's crazy that you're saying this because I had a moment yesterday and I had to write it down because it was so good. I'm like, I can't forget this, where I literally wrote down a lot of us struggle with accountability, especially self-accountability, because we jump to conclusions and are so ready to like shame ourselves and beat ourselves up when the truth is like, that's such a cop out. Like, it's so easy to beat yourself up. It's so easy to say, oh man, you did this wrong. Like you're such a bad person. You know what I mean? And that can come from upbringing, that can come from whatever, right? Like we don't know true accountability because it's harder to give yourself love, to give yourself compassion, to be like, you know what, you messed up, but let's show up better the next time and actually show up better. Like that's harder to do than it is to just be like, oh, you suck and you'll forever suck. You know what I mean? It's like,
yes,
people struggle with that. And I struggle with that. And having that thought, the reason I wrote it down is because I was like, I want to circle back and remember in those moments, like, we're not copping out. Like, we're not allowing ourselves to be like, or I'm not allowing myself to be like looking in the mirror, you know, and just being so critical because that's easy. It's easier to do that, you know, and we weren't raised to know that true accountability is being able to say, you know what, you messed up, but it's okay. You'll show up better next time and you'll actually do the thing that you wanted to do. And that is what accountability looks like. And that's success to me.
Like imagine being able to talk to yourself like that. Like imagine really being able to say, I messed up and that's okay. We're just not comfortable doing that. And I very much understand the struggle of that because again, I remember like somebody on my team, she's new and she's been such an asset to like me as a whole holistic person. And she came in on operational level, Ebony, shout out to her. And recently she told me, because I told her like I had an off week and I'm in air quotes y'all because it wasn't really an off week because, you know, I was off ask, right? Like we're still running and the business is still going and like, it is what it is. But I wanted to just work, like have some stuff for myself, like go to float therapy and go to the Chinese medicine doctor and like go do some stuff for me. And her and I had a meeting scheduled in between that. And I was like, hey, so like based on your time and when you can meet, I actually don't want to meet in the middle of my like self day. And she's like, that's fine. Like we can move it this day. And I was feeling bad about that because I'm like, oh, that's going to move other deadlines though. And I didn't like that part, right? Like I was trying to figure out how do I honor myself and like make this part of the business move. And she responded with, it's productive for you to choose yourself in this moment. And I had never really I was like, productive? Like, it's just like crazy because productivity is connected to so much doing. It is so not connected to being. And it should be. It is so productive to be. It's so productive to be in your real truth. It's so productive to be in your vulnerability. It's so productive to be in your honesty, to be in your, you know, disappointment at the moment, to also move past those things. But it's like, it's really productive to be ourselves, to be humans versus doing, because doing is not, it's not even real. Like it's, you got to keep doing. That's what I mean by earlier when they said like, or, you know, when people say you're only as good as like the last thing you did, it's like, oh, so you want me to stay a machine? Oh yeah, no, I'm not trying to do that. Like that's doing all the time. And of course our doing is interweaved in our being, but to feel and to recognize that it is so productive to be, I'm like, that's new for me too. That's where I'm starting to be like, okay, these are where my new lessons are coming from. Cause I'm trying to find out how gorgeous it is to just be and allow that to be successful.
Absolutely, you're right. And no, we're not machines and we're not choosing that life. Sorry. Like that's what I heard. That's what I heard. But listen, this is like such a beautiful conversation. It's everything I thought it would be. So I'm happy. I hope that you are getting what you needed out of it.
Yeah.
I just had a funny thought, but I'm not going to say it out loud. Anywho, let's pivot into spicy chat. Not really, but I do want to talk relationships because I think that's another big point of conversation for us. And we both know, if I use myself as an example, like I am in a place where life is just evolving before my eyes. I'm like, man, who would have thunk? Okay. Who would have thunk? And it's taking another level of being present and requiring me to make decisions like never before. Like it's just very stretching. But what I've noticed most recently in this season is that I am desiring and desperately needing low maintenance relationships. Like it's not even a question anymore. We're at the point where like I'm about to have some really honest conversations with myself, with my loved ones, with you all, like the people closest to me. But I want to know from your point of view, like what is your relational state right now? And that can be platonic, that can be romantic. I just think it's really like, one, it's healthy to have these conversations, but I think a lot of people don't honor themselves in that way. Like they don't realize when they're feeling certain ways that like their body, their heart, their mind, their soul, like everything is telling you, you know, what you need to be doing. What do you think yours is telling you?
Yeah. Mine is telling me to release the fear of losing a friend and believing that just because you guys are separating now means you're separate forever. That's what I'm being told and learning my way through. I think I had a lot of really close friendships at one point. I still think I have like a great amount, but I recognize that obviously those friendships are at different paces and at different stages. And I'm really big on reciprocal relationships, especially on the emotional side. And I just need emotionally reciprocal relationships because that's just where I'm at in life. Like, I really want you to let me know, like, because it's a teaching stage too, to find out how much space you have for somebody, to know how you can share for somebody, to know who has space for you, to really like, I've asked friends like, hey, where are you at when the money conversation? But where are you at with this conversation? Like, where are you at with career stuff? Like, what are comfortable things for you to share with me? What would you like me to share more with you? Because I want to know, like, where are we growing to? Are we at a point that we kind of are like, we're cool here, we're kind of cool in the associate space? Cool, like no problem. Just want to identify what those relationships are, and whatever they grow to, they grow to. There's a friend that we're like new friends, and we had dinner this week, and we had such a gorgeous, vulnerable conversation. And she sent me a text after and was like, I love that vulnerability is one of our foundations. And I just love that. Like she just said, it's like, yes, because first of all, we're new friends. Like, it's harder to make new friends in your adulthood already, but making new friends and meeting them right now in my life, I'm like, yeah, what I'm really interested in it about is like helping you become a better person and you helping me become a better person. Like, that's what I want. And to me, a lot of that does stem from a problem solving skill perspective, like knowing how to be a problem solver. Like, I'm really attracted to problem solvers, and I hope that they, like, that's just like amazing. And I don't mean taking away from their time of solving their own problems. I mean, like, I trust their suggestions. You don't need to like be on a phone with me, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I want people to want me in that way too. And I understand if you don't, but I just recognize that is how I want to be wanted. It's different than like, really, I've released myself from the need to be needed, because that stemmed a lot from like my family dynamics and things like that. But now I recognize, like, I want you to want me in a real way. Like, I want you to, you know, feel like you can trust me with your emotions and trust me with your thoughts. And like, I'll do my best to hold the space. And also knowing that even though those are things I want, if there are moments that's like, I don't have space for you or they don't have space for me, that's a part of the relationship, which is so dope. Like, we don't have to, this is not like abandon yourself shit. This is everybody's teaching each other actually to see themselves better. And that is like so fruitful to me. So like, I know that's a big thing that I'm calling in right now. Just like, you know, the types of like I want, and in romantic relationships, it's similar. It's a thoughtful exchange of life and ideas and learnings. And like, we want to see each other evolve without shame and guilt. That is the root of what I want in a relationship. We want to see each other grow, and I'm not planning to shame you for it. I'm not planning to judge you for it. I'm planning to walk next to you, because at the same time, I'll be doing the same thing. So I care about how you do yours. You care about how I do mine. And we're going to problem solve each other on the way. Like, that's like, oof, that's it. So those are things I'm, you know, calling in right now, and just also like checking my current friendships. And again, I'm so aware of like, not that I'm so aware, but I'm working through the awareness of like where each friendship is at and owning where it's at and letting it be okay. If it works, cool. If it doesn't, it's like, hey, well, maybe we're not as aligned right now. Like, maybe we touch base in a year. I don't know. I've never even had that. That's a very interesting conversation to have with somebody. But if they're receptive, it's like, it just might be that right now. And it's not personal.
Right. Like that just might be what it is. But I
Yeah.
think that what I love most about what you just said and what I can relate to, I'm like, yeah, we are similar, godly. But the reciprocity that comes, or that really just like plays a role in relationships, as well as like problem solving. And I think when I say low maintenance, more specifically, is like I just know I'm in a season where I cannot be on the phone for hours on end, like with friends, or you know what I mean? Like it's the
Yeah.
way that I'm showing up is different, but it's not to say like I don't want you to have any emotions. Like, I don't want you to need nothing from me. Like, you know what I mean? You said it so perfectly. Like, it just needs to be reciprocal. Like, I don't have space for transactional relationships in my life anymore because I don't carry myself to be a transactional person. Like, I am always someone that will show up and that can be in listening ear, that can give advice. You know what I mean? And even in my like romantic relationship, in my engagement, like soon to be marriage, like that's something that we practice. This is not transactional. It's not like, oh, you did that thing, so I'm going to do another. It's like, no, how can we better ourselves and constantly be serving one another, which I think is the definition of like reciprocity at its highest level.
Yeah.
But it's just so interesting because it's yeah, it's just such an interesting dynamic because I think you have to learn these things. Like they don't come naturally. And you mentioned earlier that and I think you meant this in like a platonic way, like you're having to be okay with the friendship ending.
Well, there was a friendship that ended, or like that halted about a year ago, that I still really think about. And I'm releasing myself from the feeling of like, that means we're done forever, because I just don't know if that's what it means. But like, if that's where we are, that's where we are. And I'm also owning the fact that maybe I wasn't a great friend for her either. This is not just about how people treated me. This is like, and I have another friendship where like we're kind of just chatting through where we are, and I have to be open to the fact that it's possible I didn't show up for that person as well. And that, yes, it sucks, and I wish I would have done better, but you got to learn through one of these relationships. So unfortunately, it just happened to be ours. You know what I mean? So it's like I had to learn, oh shit, I didn't show up for you, and maybe you decided I'm done with Stacy, and that's possible. And if on a deeper level, if you know my intention, you know that was not intentional, but maybe I messed up. And like I'm just trying to own all parts of it, because none of it can be only on one side or the other. That's not true. But so when two human beings, 2+ people are involved in anything, it's like it could be any of us. It could be a multitude of things. And so I'm just owning in where I also, had my learnings.
For sure. And I what comes to mind is like, how do you like, not how do you have that conversation, but more like, how do you, when it is on you, or like when you did play a role, like how do you get to that point of even asking or learning, like, oh, dang, like I thought it was you. Like you were the reason why this did not work, but you also had feedback for me. You know what I mean? Like, how do you get to that point of just being able to identify like, man, okay, maybe I could have shown up better for you?
Yeah. Well, I feel like everyone's different in terms of like how they ask for feedback. I'm not afraid to ask for feedback. That's something that I kind of wish I would stop doing, but I do not mind asking for feedback. And I feel like people don't mind giving it to me. So I'm like, okay, like, yeah. So, I was in a conversation with a friend last summer actually, and we had a hard combo about where we were at. And I think I started, and then she had feedback. And I'm telling you, I definitely cried. I was like, oh my God, I had no idea that's what you were thinking was happening. Like, I really had no idea. And that's what shook me, of like, it's very possible to just be totally missing each other and be having these like feelings or thoughts towards each other, and really just be completely missing how you are showing up in the relationship. And that's what I mean by, I had to own that, because I know it's not intentional. I know it wasn't like on purpose. I'm trying to be a shitty person or any of those things. Not to say that that's what she said, but just like in ways that I was missing her, I was literally just missing her. That has to happen in life. Like, if we're not okay with our humanness and our both sides and our imperfections, then we really, what are we doing? Because to expect me to have shown up perfectly would have been unfair. To expect her to have shown up perfectly would have been unfair. To be able to call each other out on some of the things, it was like, hey, this just isn't aligned for me. And it's like, oh, okay, that's a learning of like, we just might not be aligned at this moment, or I am growing in this way though. And I really did think I was missing it. So either is there a way I can do better? And if they have that like clarity, then they can give you that. And if they don't, and they want to work through it, then like giving them the space to do that. But I think the if the relationship or if the conversation is rooted in, I first would say love, and then I would say in like intentionality, and then in a space of, it's like some immediate self-forgiveness there too, and forgiveness of each other, because it's real, those, like, it's not a fun combo. Like, I was super affected. That was the second one I'd had within a year. And I was like, and the first one was really tough too, because I really did not realize how this person saw me, but I actually also recognized, oh, I don't actually trust how you see me. Because there are parts of what they said I could identify with, and parts of what they said I was like, oh, I really don't identify. Like, I'm self-aware enough to know that's not on me. And that's okay. Like, it isn't like, it's not negative that it's on you, but at the end of the day, it ain't on me. So like, that's okay too. And we also just might not see each other, the way that we would like to be seen. And that's important in a relationship. And if we're just not there, we should also part ways. So it's like, I'm learning through the experiences I'm having and through the conversations I'm currently like working through. I think it's a trial and error thing in terms of your question of like how to have them. It is a trial and error. You're never going to know how to do it right the first time. What the heck? Like, these are so emotionally charged conversations. So it's really just, if your core intention is love and understanding, however the conversation goes is however it goes.
That's so literally me. That's so good. To everything you say, but I'm seriously, man, like, character is such a big factor in having hard conversations, because you have to be able to identify between like your emotions and your feelings and like in someone's character. Cause it's easy to pin like they're the bad guy, I'm the victim in any situation in the way we look at other people, or vice versa. But I think what's so important about what you said is like, yes, these types of moments have to be rooted in love and intentionality. And if there isn't like clarity there, like, that's okay. We have time to get to that point. But again, if you're already looking at my character, or if I'm already looking at your character negatively, like, we're not going to get anywhere with this. And also love that you knew your own character to be like, that ain't me. Like, I'm sorry. Like, those are your things that you need to navigate and deal with. But I can't internalize something that isn't true of me. So that's
and I didn't do it alone. I asked around. I'm like, is this something I do, y'all? Like, that was also super uncomfortable, because some people were like, well, and I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, well, you have done it, but like, I like, this is how I interpreted it because I know you. And I was like, okay. And then this next person was like, well, you haven't done it like that, but you did this. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm just going out here getting punched. Like, I don't
mean to laugh, but it's like, what am I doing? I'm doing everything wrong. Like, like those moments, it's like panic. But no, that's so big of you. And I love it. It's growth at the end of the day.
Yeah, I really wanted to be better for myself and for like whatever the next friendship like that, came around, and what could I really learn from that? And like, I might not be able to salvage this one, but okay, like, there's something I got to take from it. So that was good. And I felt like I remember that was a hard little moment for me, but I appreciated it because I couldn't believe I had the balls to take it. I was like, oh, I can take this though. And like, that's cool too, because okay, like, that's how committed I am to like being my best self. So cool.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, we're coming to the close of the show. It sucks. This is so good. But I understand listeners have places to be. Out of all things, why did that make
us with you guys? That's so funny.
Right. Just put us in your headphones. Right. My last and final question for you is for the listeners, because I think, again, I knew the conversation would be fruitful, but I also feel like if at any point, there's something tangible that I can help people walk away with, like, that's always my goal. So what advice would you give to someone who is seeking to grow as an individual, but don't know where to start? And I ask you this because I feel like you have really, truly done the work, and you can really give guidance on what this looks like. And I hope for anyone listening that feels like, man, like, I feel a shift, like, I know there's something coming or there's something happening internally, but I don't know what that looks like, what would you tell them?
Okay. Wow. Okay. Wow. Yeah. I love this question, because a big part of what was a part of my resistance when I knew it was time to grow, or when I knew shifts were happening, was I'm afraid of what I'm going to learn about myself on the other side. I don't know if I'm going to still be me as in air quotes, guys, because what is me, right? Like, me is a collection of upbringing and trauma and memorized things that I'm supposed to do or thought I was supposed to do. So really, me is constantly evolving and doesn't actually need to be any of those things. Like, that's not actually real. All of those things can, like, we all are are a reflection of our environment and the things that were taught to us and the things we stapled in our hearts and our minds. And so, like, knowing that I can be someone else in the same lifetime and still love myself is amazing, which is true for you too. So when you're changing and you're growing and you're scared to find out. It is scary. Don't be scared, is what I would say. Of course it's scary, but like, you can do it. I'm telling you, I can't believe I can't believe it. Like, I'm shocked. Y'all should. I loved who I was in 2017. I thought that was who I was going to be forever. I had no idea I wasn't going to be that person forever. I was like, well, this feels good. I'm this girl. I'm this person. I care about this and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, if I let some of this go, will my friends love me? Will my family still love me? Where's my belonging going to be? Will my community love me? That shit was scary. But then you're like, oh, but like, when I change, the people who come with me still get it. The people who leave might not. The new people I learn are meeting me right where I am. Oh my God, life goes on. Like, look at that. So I say that to say, is like, it is scary. Don't be scared, because the person on the other side is just as lovable, if not more lovable, if not more like aligned to where you are. And your dark side is a part of you. It's not like separate from you or worse than you or better than you. It's none of those. It's just a part of you. So I had to also come to front with my dark side, the shit about me that I just do not like. And I'm like, I might not change it. Like, there's some of the shit I'm just not going to be able to change. Like, some of it is like, I'm a little neurotic about some stuff, y'all. And like, sorry, and like, I've tried and I will continue to try and work on it, but I'm not going to use it as a way to say I'm not good enough, or to say I'm not lovable, or I don't deserve certain things. Like, those things used to say, make me feel like you have to keep working to be a better blah, blah. And when I tell y'all now that I want to be the best version of myself, I don't mean it in the same way, because that was rooted in perfectionism. And this is rooted in wholeness. It's rooted in my whole self. I want to know my whole self. I want to know my good, my bad, my ugly, my in between, my all of the like nooks and crannies of what it takes to be myself, and to keep evolving what that means. Because like, how delicious is that? How cool is it to be confident enough to get to know yourself? Like, that's what confidence is earned. It's not like automatic. Like, it is earned. So I'm earning it by growing and by reading that book that slapped me in the face. Like, one of my first growth books, I would say, was Ego is the Enemy. Y'all, slapped across the face. I said, whoa, 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 whoa. The second one was Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. That was like my book. And we just kept going from there. I was just like, okay, I'm okay. And it's not just the reading, it's the reflections, it's conversations, it's not being afraid. Hey, how do I show up in this relationship? Because we don't really want to know, because we might have to change. And the truth is, we might have to change. That's okay too. Like, that's really cool to have the ability and the confidence to be like, I don't have to do this anymore just because I've done it for so long. I don't. And so I hope that answers your question. But I think all of those things were things that I had to start realizing allowed me to just like take the next level of growth and growing and learning and like being somewhere else. Like, y'all cannot tell me that I would have been interested in moving to Houston. That's not something that was on my list. It was not on my list. Having a podcast, not on my list. Doing red braids, not on my list. Like, none of this stuff was on the list, So I just love it. I love all the new stuff. I'm like, oh, because you gave yourself an opportunity to try something else. So give yourself that opportunity, because you deserve it. You really do.
I love that. So beautiful. Give yourself that opportunity because you deserve it. Well, in closing, and also we're going to put those books in the show notes, because I don't have Ego as the Enemy. I definitely have Subtle Art. So I want y'all to be able to tune into those as well. And I know they're both probably on Audible and for purchase, like hard copies. But anywho, in closing, where can the people find you? We want to support. We want to follow all the goodness, all the newness, all the red braids.
I love, you guys can check me out on Instagram at One Take Stace. I also have the podcast Instagram at Human to Human with Stacy Ike, 2, the number 2, not the word 2. Please come hang out with me on stacyike.com and on anywhere you listen to podcasts. Obviously you'll be listening to The Minor Detail, but anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can also find Human to Human with Stacy Ike. It's so good. It's like my favorite place to be right now. It's a home I'm building. So come check me out there. And yeah, that should be the rounds.
We love it. Well, I can be honest in saying the only podcasts I'm currently subscribed to are Human to Human and The Minor Detail. So I'm telling y'all now, you won't regret it. Two of the best podcasts that will change your life.
Honestly.
But thank you so much for being here. This was such a fun, honest, raw conversation. I think we literally hit on everything, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
And for all of you listening in, this is like true friendship. So I really hope that you can feel that through the sound waves, the airwaves, and that you'll come back and listen again. So thank you for being here. Until next time, bye.